the CCMA, Mr. Moajana, the leadership of the labor movement as represented today by the president of COSATU, Comrade Zingiswalusi, and the collective of business as represented by Mr. Moyana. I also recognize a number of invited speakers and guests, and amongst them, I recognize the Judge President of the Labour Court, Judge Wakely. But most importantly, the delegates, the shop stewards and the union officials. I've also heard about my apologies, the representative of the ILO who's with us. Program directors, many thanks to the conference organizers for me to be party to this discussion. As a new minister of employment and labor, not necessarily of labor. What does it mean when another leg has been added of employment? I won't be able to say what it means because we're busy trying to define and redefine that. But thanks for inviting me to participate in what has become an annual national institution and the opportunity to share information and ideas. But allow me to start here, colleagues. And I think I must raise this issue because I think that's where Comrade Makulu started. First, as government, led by President Ramaphosa, and as you have already heard over the past 2 weeks, the debates from Parliament by all political parties, we say collectively, as the leadership of South Africa, that nothing justifies the criminal activities of last week. The attacks on foreign nationals, usually African but also Asian, and the looting of the businesses. By the way, these businesses, no matter how small, they do create some economic activity and jobs, directly or indirectly. Yes, there is a problem in certain sectors where employers have driven a wedge between the people with the exploitation of the desperate foreign workers who are paid less than the stipulated minimum wage. They are so desperate to take anything because of political instability where they are coming from. Exploitation of the non-registration of those workers with the UIF, the failure to pay overtime, Sunday work and public holiday rates. Basically, undermining or violating all the basic rights which workers are supposed to have. And we must put that directly to the employers who are exploiting that particular situation. But I think we must also be honest to ourselves. If these events happened in 2008, 2015, and 2019, what lessons have we learned? Because this is not new. We need some hard talk amongst ourselves. What are the responsibilities of government? Not just South African government, the responsibility of the SADC region or the continent. What are the responsibilities of us as labor? What is the responsibility of business in dealing with this particular situation? Ngoba ukukhomba omunye ehlweni akuzusiza lutho. And I'm raising this issue because people have been talking about porous borders, illegal people, and so on and so on. But who perpetuates corruption in the borders? Is it not some of our workers who are getting bribes? Is it not the failure of us as government to deal with dictators who are very corrupt, who can't respect any governance in some of the countries, leading to the political instability where many people are running away and end up in our country? Are we addressing those issues? The issue of economic migration and movement of people, it's an international phenomenon. We see it on television on a daily basis, what is happening in Northern Africa and Southern Europe. So that's an international phenomenon. Have we been able as SADC to talk about our own migratory policies and labor policies as a region? Or we're ducking and diving instead of answering the very hard questions? Because there's one thing we can't run away from, colleagues. If we're talking about economy, which is integrated, we're talking about the markets in the region, we're talking about trade in the region, we are not an island as South Africa. But we have to deal with those issues in an orderly way. But unfortunately, these issues have also been conflated by some of the issues around crime. Because indeed, we must accept that there is crime in the country. We must accept that the issue of drugs, it's a serious matter, pushed not just by foreigners, pushed by some foreigners and pushed by some South Africans. We must accept that the issue of gender femicide is a very serious problem in this country. And the issue of women trafficking, it's a connection of syndicates inside this country who are also nationals of this country. Some of them might be foreign nationals. So I'm saying we need to ask hard questions to ourselves. But I want to repeat it, program directors. Nothing justifies the criminal activities of last week's. The attacks on those foreign nationals are not going to bring us any solution. I thought I must start there, and it was necessary, so that we're very clear in our message. Coming to the topic of today, looking back at the history of the annual conference, it does occur to me that the CCMA has always been ahead of the curve. The inaugural conference in 2017, amongst others, addressed the need for just and equitable mechanisms to effectively manage workplace conflict, ahead of legislation which dealt with the pressing matter. The second conference in 2018 adopted the theme, the future of work. This was a year before the ILO conducted its research and resolve on this matter. Again, this year the theme is the national minimum wage post-implementation conversation, a conversation which will take place before the National Minimum Wage Commission releases its research report into the impact of the first 6 months of the implementation of the national minimum wage, a comprehensive investigation into this impact, not only on employment, but also on the poverty and inequality. So I expect that the release of the National Minimum Wage Commission report will reignite a national debate on the minimum wage, but a debate now based on statistical evidence rather than the right-wing ideology and scaremongering. Clearly, the CCMA and the delegates here will be well placed to contribute and play a leading role in that debate. Not only because you will have interrogated the issues in detail at this conference, but also because you are on the ground And as CCMA and as worker representatives, you already have a good idea where any problem lie and possible changes that need to be made. I imagine that this discussion begins right here, right now, with the first plenary session, which is to be addressed by Professor Adriaan van der Walt, the chair of the Minimum Wage Commission. I look forward to receiving the report, documents, inputs, and any recommendations to emerge from this conference. This will greatly assist the National Minimum Wage Commission and my department, as well as the CCMA, in further refining the National Minimum Wage Policy, the regulations, and the implementation strategies. By the way, it's shocking. It's shocking, the president of COSATU, that some of the people are calling for a review of the labor laws and the minimum wage, even before they can implement that. How do you call for a review even before you implement? None of us is under the illusion that the minimum wage of 20 rand per hour will end poverty in our country. But I do believe that it's important to establish the principle of the minimum wage standards as part of the struggle for decent work. Very interesting. Some people have been asking me, even on radio, what is decent work? Why not just work? I simply say decent work is very simple. It's giving the workers their rights, the right to collective bargaining, the right to organize, the right to negotiate, the right to fair dispute resolution mechanisms, the right to respect of collective bargaining agreements, health and safety at the workplace, paying the minimum wage and so on. That's decent work. Don't talk about all these other things and you want to complicate this thing as if it's not a complicated thing, what workers want. So all I'm saying, this is part of the struggle for the decent work. Moreover, initial estimates were that some 6 million people, or 6 million of the lowest paid workers would benefit from the national minimum wage. We await the findings of the National Minimum Wage Commission in this regard. More generally, let me commend the CCMA for its ongoing outreach work, of which this conference is but one component. Work which goes far beyond the legal and the judicial functions of the CCMA. The CCMA has made a point that shop stewards and union officials are our eyes and ears on the ground. They are the first point of contact for any distressed employee seeking relief. And that goes for all the issues across the board, not just around the minimum wage, but also on issues of health and safety, accessing the compensation fund for work-related injuries, accessing the unemployment insurance fund. I was embarrassed, comrades. I was embarrassed. The first issue which confronted me, which had been discovered by the e-news, the two workers, one was burned by acid, and the one was also burned in, what is it? Matayarin. Yes, in PE, the tire factory. After getting injured, the one cannot be able to see. The one, it's about 70% burns. They were just thrown back into their homes, nobody helping them. Shocking. And that worker in PE still remembers who his shop steward was, organized by one of the powerful unions in the auto industry, by INOMSA. That was an embarrassment if we have the unions there. But also it raised something very interesting. In one of the cases, the fact or the company is saying this worker was brought by a broker, it's not our responsibility. The broker says this worker is not working for us. We hand it over to that company. And then it strengthens this argument against the labor brokers. Because when chips are down, no one wants to take responsibility. So it's very important, therefore, colleagues, that I want to indicate that the shop stewards need to be empowered so that they continue with their role to represent the workers. In relation to the issues of equity and discrimination, and I'm sure that the chair of the Commission for Employment Equity will have a lot more to say on this matter. And the recently released annual report indicated once more that after 2 decades, Africans and coloureds remain grossly underrepresented at all levels, but especially at the management level. We've concluded that self-regulation is not working and that enforcement may be necessary through setting of the sectoral targets and ensuring compliance by any company seeking to do business with a public body. Somebody challenged me and said, are you not going to scare those companies and turn away investment? And then I said, do you want people to continue after 5 years, continue defending their apartheid inherited privileges against transformation? Because we don't want to force people to do certain things and say voluntarism is going to help and self-regulation. It's not going to help. And with due respect, when you listen to a number of cases, I sense some arrogance which is emerging from those who enjoyed the privileges of apartheid, because we seem not to be tough with them. Let me emphasize this issue of the eyes and the ears on the ground. My department has inspection and enforcement branch, but it cannot be present in every workplace. Remember, according to the UAF, we've registered about 1.8 million employers, and it might be more than that. Our inspectors are not even 2%. I undertook in my budget speech to expand the branch with 200 additional inspectors and 500 health and safety officers. Program directors, nobody has shuguma. For the first time that indicate an shop steward, kudala ndise boardroom, ngokufuna ndithethe ezanto kudala ndizingcono. But we still need your assistance in identifying. I've said with 200 additional inspectors and 500 additional health and safety officers, we still need your assistance in identifying rogue employers. And I give this undertaking that where such non-compliance is identified, we will inspect and enforce the law. And yes, I've heard the stories that some inspectors who are rather too close to the employers, again, inform us, we will investigate. One worker in one company said, 2 workers in fact, usisi no put, but usizile minister weza kithi directly, because if uqale ofisini bese ngeke sisavuma ukukhuluma nawe. Ngoba abanye lama inspectors wakho athi make qale ofisini athi ukuhleba nama employer abuya sekebhala yonke into soku correct yonke into. Sibe sisogola la phansi thina. So there is that allegations, but we are going to be brutal this time around. Those who are violating the employment policies. And I've said, it several times, that employers would decide to employ 100% foreign national drivers and say South African drivers do not have the skill for the sophisticated trucks, they are a joke. I've said that. That leads to perception. It's a recipe for disaster in the midst of this high unemployment. It leads to all perceptions. As much as is violence is not a solution, but it's a recipe for disaster. And you can see that this thing of exploiting the foreign workers because they are very desperate, they will take anything, has been extended into construction. It's there in the retail, it's there in the farming. You can see what's going on. Wake up those unions who are organizing in the retail. How do you have workers as cashiers standing for the whole day in some of the big shops? Standing, they are not given a chair. Wake up, guys, as shop stewards. People are being exploited. So the source of all this conflict is exploitation by some employers, not all employers. Many of the employers are complying with the law. But the violations, we are going to be very hard on them. Let me now touch another topic, the changing nature of work. Part of my remit from the organizers was to comment on the changing nature of work and its implications. We know that the world of work is not a static entity, but constantly evolving. It's evolving at an increasingly rapid rate. Digitalization, automation, artificial intelligence, and the fourth industrial revolution is going to affect us. Some jobs will go, new jobs and skills. Training and retraining and upskilling is very central. It's going to be required. That's what you must demand now from the employers and government. About your own monies of the UIF, of some part of the compensation. That's what you must demand so that people can be rediverted. That also directly affects the course offerings of higher education and further education and training sector. The demands for certain skills by employers, as well as the need for the mindset change by the students and the work seekers. Comrade Makulu, I remember Wits University, Rao, I remember, University of Natal. They were very, very central in a number of the software training which you went to. Not some of these crash courses where people take a lot of money from the sitters and say they are training shop stewards. They do crash courses. And then they run with millions. And some of the shop stewards and the leaders are accountable because they sit in those boards. They approve those crash courses. And I'm saying that time has come now that we influence even the universities what they are offering to the workers. Specialized courses. And now I fought here with Comrade Losi. And we're from the same background, but I fought with her. I said this debate about SOEs and this debate about mining and the future of coal, we must confront it. You're not going to resist change. This debate about Eskom, how are we going to sit and say we are anti-privatization until Eskom goes boom, down? And we say that about the SAA and all the other entities, and lots of workers lose. Or are we going to say we are going to engage with government and say, here you can't do this, here you can do this. Maybe we'll agree on certain things because we can see the crisis. And this is our proposal. in terms of dealing with this. Don't wait until those things collapse. Save a number of jobs. Maybe those you cannot save, you argue for training and retraining. That's a debate I was having with because we meet a lot as also Usbali. Yeah, and Tategowabo. So that world of work, comrades, is not static. As trade unionists, we must also be sophisticated, even in our own argument, in our own education, to engage with this future. Because it's a fact. It's already happening in the farms. It's already happening. Mechanization is replacing a number of workers. You need a few workers now. I was shocked here. I'm not sure which company, which is here next to Tembisa. Is it Coca-Cola? I think we went there. And I was shocked that thousands of workers were replaced. In the whole shift, it was not more than 20 workers. From where this thing was starting, the bottling and everything, until the packaging and so on, I was shocked. And that happened a bit some time back. And we must just be ready to confront those issues and argue on this issue of training. So you cannot prevent, therefore, technological change. And this is, of course, has the potential to be very disruptive in the economic and societal terms. The process will need to be managed, a process which must be led by government, but needs involvement of all social partners and the stakeholders, labor, business, and training institutions. Indeed, last year, the International Labour Organization established a global commission on the future of work. Incidentally, the global commission was co-chaired by our own President Ramaphosa, together with the Prime Minister of Sweden. And the main message and the recommendations of the Global Commission report focuses on the following: on the need to reinvigorate the social contract between government, labor, and employers. Whether we like it or not, we need that contract to say, these are going to be your responsibilities, government. These are going to be your responsibilities, labor. These are going to be your responsibilities, business. Let's agree and hold each other to account. Again, with the intention of instituting a human-centered agenda in managing the introduction of the new technology so that human beings are not left behind. Amongst others, this approach requires the need for lifelong learning, supporting the people through the transition, strengthening the social protection, upholding the safety standard, decent and sustainable work, shifting the incentives towards human-centered business and economic model. Let me quote from the declaration of the centenary of the ILO this year on these matters. I quote, "In discharging its constitutional mandate, taking into account the profound transformations of the world of work, and further developing its human-centered approach to the future of work, the ILO must direct its efforts to ensuring a just transition for the future of work that contributes to sustainable development in its economic, social, and environmental dimensions, harnessing the fullest potential of the technological progress and productivity growth, including through the social dialogue to achieve the decent work and sustainable development, which ensures dignity, self-fulfillment, and just sharing of the benefits for all, promoting the acquisitions of skills, competencies, and qualifications for all the workers throughout the working lives as a joint responsibility of government and social partners. Address existing and anticipated skills gaps. Pay particular attention to ensuring that the education and training systems are responsive to the labor market needs." End the quote. It must be reassuring for us as a nation that we are led by the president who sees this bigger picture when it comes to the future of work, and indeed has led the research and the debate on the future of work in international forums. By the way, I also give thanks for the fact that we are now led by the president committed to fighting corruption and state capture. This is necessary precondition for turning the economy around, as well as managing the rapid changes that will take place in the world of work. Comrades, you must not just be excited to serve in boards as sub-stewards. It's corruption, stolen billions, which were supposed to go towards development. Amasela funeka siwakhuphe. But also look after your own funds. Look at what is happening in your compensation fund. Look at what is happening in your UIF. Look at what is happening in the PIC. Those are your monies as workers. Are they being used for the purposes which are going to develop you? But I must talk about the Department of Employment and Labor. I need to say a few words to clarify the name change of my department from the Department of Labor to the Department of Employer and Labor, lest this lead to confusion. So don't be shocked now. We are no more receiving letters from DOL. We are receiving letters from DEL now. No more Department of Labor, DEL, Employment and Labor. Traditionally, the former Department of Labor was charged with the developing policy and legislation to register the labor market with the objectives of promoting healthy industrial relations, promoting healthy and safe conditions of work, promoting decent work, and now a national minimum wage, promoting employment equity so that employment at all levels reflects the demographics of the country, providing social protection through the UIF and the compensation fund, inspecting and enforcing the labor laws and conditions. So that mandate remains. The Department of Employer, but I must say something about this mandate. When we're tweaking, we're coming up with some of the amendments, it's because we're seeing some loopholes. I know that some of the people are having complaints about the issue of balloting and the strikes. I thought that debate, we long past it. I know that, for instance, in the union where I was coming from and the federation, we long dealt with that even before I went to government. The issue of us balloting, we long past that thing. It's because shop steward should have the mandates of the workers, not their own mandates. Tata bantu apho bafake strike esingapheli, agqiba balose abasebenzi, everything. Coming up very militant, but the workers have nothing after that. We must be responsible. We must not seek irresponsibility only from the employers' business. We must also be responsible as unions. Some are still very militant, but they can't have audited statements. Why? How are they running the finances of the workers? They talk corruption, but when it comes to them, what is happening there? We must be tough to ourselves. As much as we are tough against government and business, we must also be tough to ourselves as sub-stewards. Hey, mhlambe bazathi he has crossed the floor, he has become reactionary now. I was also very unpopular about those things, even in my own union, from some of the sub-stewards. So the mandate remains of the department. The Department of Employment and Labor will continue to champion these decent work conditions and healthy industrial relations. This is essential to creating the labor market, a stable labor market, which in turn is conducive to investment, to growth and employment. That is the interest of all of us, socially responsible employers and labor alike. So then the remaining and the reconfiguration to include the word employment needs to be unpacked. First, the renaming points to the President's priorities, growth and jobs. The department now has additional focus to implement active labor market policies with the objectives of leveraging the resources we have to preserve and create jobs, as well as to promote appropriate training and retraining, which meets the skills demanded by the labor market. This needs to be read with the other objectives and the guidelines issued by the President in relation to the transformation, anti-corruption, efficient, effective government, what the President terms joined-up government, where departments are expected to collaborate and align their activities, no more silos and duplication. If you look at the training, all departments have all different trainings and different institutions. And all it said is we're training workers for that. But once you look into the quality of those, some they leave much to be desired. But they are also, even if they are good, they are not talking to one another. So we're doing away with silos and duplication. The department might not take these because where are the levers of job creation? Those tools might not be with the Department of Labor. They might lie in the different departments, but the issue of coordination, it's very important of all those efforts. So the specific implications, comrades, of renaming and reconfiguring the Department of Employment and Labor include the following. The department will coordinate government efforts to create jobs and reduce unemployment, and will be required to change its approach from just mere compliance enforcement to facilitating job creation. So a much clearer focus of job creation and providing conducive environment for investment, growth, employment, which includes, of course, a stable labor market and labor relations, the coordination of government job creation initiatives, leveraging the UIF and compensation fund resources to preserve and create jobs. E.g., the UIF assisted in the recapitalization of EDCON with 140,000 direct and indirect jobs. This came, of course, with strict guarantees and sustainable turnaround plans. So it doesn't mean that workers' monies must just be given. We have also launched a training layoff scheme to support the distressed businesses and utilize our entity Productivity South Africa to develop turnaround and rescue strategies. It has been pointed out to me that we need to promote synergies between the CCMA, which receives retrenchment applications, and Productivity SA, which is in the business of developing turnaround strategies and supporting the business in stress. So in I call it a visit to be educated by the different stakeholders. We will have to talk about these issues, Comrade Director. We have partnered with the Department of Higher Education and Training and the SETAs for training directed towards the actual demands of the labor market, of which part will be providing training relevant to the needs of the fourth industrial revolution. So if there's chaos, Comrade Losi, don't blame us. Blame your own sub-stewards who are sitting in those boards and deciding on those programs in the SETAs. Some have asked me, what do you say about SETAs? Don't you think that they must go back to the Department of Labor? I said, regardless of where they are located, the issue is what they are doing and how as the departments are coordinating. The issue is not location. The issue is what they are doing and how there's coordination amongst the different departments. And Productivity SA, I've mentioned, will assist in supporting and training the SMMEs, because some of the workers must be directed there. We are also beefing up the state employment services to streamline the placement of work seekers. An example is to roll out online the youth centers. We're putting youth centers all over the country now, providing a free service to employers and work seekers, including psychometric testing, career counseling, generating of CVs, and verification of qualifications. We're all doing that free. We are also charged with strengthening the network to promote the social dialogue between the social partners and government. Other specific commitments include implementation of the Presidential Job Summits commitments, which are subject to tracking mechanism, indicating that 70% of the commitments are already underway. But after a year, we must be able to evaluate how far have we implemented, what has been successful, and so on. There have been concerns which have been raised. Absorption of about 1 million youth, the so-called NEET, NEET is N-E-E-T, not in employment, they are not in education, they are not in training. They even do not have matric, some of them. Very, very serious. That's a huge number there. We need to cater for them. The Labor Activation Program, which is led in partnership with more than 30 state-owned training providers and institutions to implement the training of the UIF beneficiaries. The intention is to train over 160 learners over a period of 3 years. The training will vary from skills programs to learnership to artisan training. At the Q1, 20,000 people are in training, with over 75% being young people and more than 50% being women. But we must check if those programs are quality programs, because we can have very huge numbers, only to find that they come to nothing. There's a project development partnership, which is in partnership with the UIF to create and fund early stage businesses. This PDP fund is expected to create and support over 10,000 jobs, which are direct and indirect, particularly ensuring that the future of work opportunities are utilized. In spelling out the new employment-related mandate of the department, I also want to make a point very strongly that under this government, wholesale deregulation, as advocated by some, is a non-starter. Worker struggles over decades for decent work will not be overturned, Comrade Makul. But we also do encourage engagement with business to see where red tape can be removed and bureaucracy be eliminated, easing the cost of doing business. You know, when I was at Public Works, I used to say, comrades, if you want to do something, a project with government, starting from planning that project, before you can even implement it, it can take you 2 years to plan it. But in business, it can take you a month to plan it, and then they implement. You don't know this red tape in government. You are told about signing this and that, this submission, this director must approve, then after that, same thing, the chief director, after that it goes to the DDG, and then somewhere you are told when you are looking for it. No, it's somewhere between the DG's office and the minister's office. It's as if this paper is walking on its own somewhere in between. And then we are told that, no, we don't know what has happened, we're just tracking it. Very bureaucratic red tape things have frustrated people who want to do things. And I think business must raise those issues. That's in our own interest. And I would urge the conference to give some thought on some of this matter. And on that note, program directors, let me wish you, with the STEWARDS, a successful conference and look forward to engaging with the CCMA on the outcomes and the recommendations of this conference. How I wish that, again, for the next 2 days, with all other bureaucratic things which they want me, even my signature, things cannot go. Even to employ a domestic worker, it cannot go without my signature, even if the DG is there, you see. So that's what is facing us. Comrades, thank you very much. Siyabulela.
Mr. Minister, Chairperson of the governing body of CCMA, the Director, President of COSATU, and of course, the representative of organized business, ladies and gentlemen, I only serve as a slight diversion from the serious discussions that you're going to have over the next day or two at this conference. I will not be speaking on the topics that you're going to discuss. That's a great thing about being a judge. I discuss anything I wish to. Anyway, I must say that we meet at a time, and this conference takes place at a time when our country, particularly its labor market, faces a number of challenges. The unprecedented high unemployment rate, labor unrest due to wage negotiations across some sectors, mass retrenchments for various reasons, including the fourth industrial revolution, low economic growth, reduction in productivity both in agriculture and manufacturing sectors, civil violence, and crucially poverty. This is the time we meet. And today also is to the date, is the 42nd anniversary of the murder of Stephen Biko. As we gather here to ponder on some of the important and thorny issues regard being had to various presentations, the question that I ask myself is what role, if any, could the bench or judiciary play in helping to solve some of the issues that I just referred to above? In answering the question, I am mindful of the fact that judges are not policymakers, and the judgment should not have the consequence so as to intrude in other branches of the government terrain. South African labor market faces many challenges. One fundamental problem arises from the economy's low capacity to absorb labor. This low absorption rate could be the result of mismatch between skills of the workforce and those demanded by industry. This perhaps signifies that a large number of the country's workforce has not been trained in the skills required by the industry. Added to this mismatch of skills is automation as a result of the fourth industrial revolution, which needs new skills. Other factors include poverty, inequality, lack of education, all of which contributes towards the challenges faced by the labor market. And as the minister said, I think it's time that we forced industries to start training people to fit into the labor market. There are, however, some who argue that centralized bargaining and labor legislation, including the national minimum wage, compound the challenges in the labor market. I'm not sure that there is merit in this argument. I mean, for example, Germany has a minimum national wage, and they don't face the same challenges we face in South Africa. Various proposals have been put forward to solve the labor market crisis. Upskilling of workers, creation of vocational training colleges, and similar schemes. But these are proposals best suitable for economists and policymakers, and the judiciary obviously cannot involve itself with these matters. Although I was very happy to hear the minister mention that we also need to see and make sure that these colleges and training centers offer proper and relevant training. I am, however, of the view that the courts can be an important instrument to instill change that is needed to help labor markets. Courts could be an instrument for social change without intrusion on those sectors, especially entrusted with that role. Social change could be assessed with regard to the changes in law and policies. If the law and policies are passed to satisfy a judgment, then courts achieve social change. It is easy for courts to achieve social change because courts are free from electoral constraints and institutional arrangements that prevent changes. Courts are not mere adjudicative forums where opposing parties seek relief. The courts must also be vehicles for change, where judgments impact not only on the individual but on the society as well. courts cannot lose sight of the history behind the adoption of the LRA, and they embrace, as they must, the values that underpin our new Constitution, which includes the principle of equality and, in the world of work, equal work opportunities for all, and compliance with the need to uplift the historically disadvantaged. While the judiciary is cognizant of its role, it also needs assistance in the form that it remains functional and able to address the needs of litigants. The workload of the Labour Court has, over the years, increased substantially. Last year, we opened just over 13,000 cases. These are the number of cases that were referred to the Labour Court, which has a total complement of 14 judges. This means that each judge, in order to ensure that there is no backlog, has to deal with 1,000 cases a year. This is impossible. At best, a judge can only properly able to deal with 100 cases a year. In the High Court, they deal with even less. And yet, a Labour Court judge has to deal with so much more in very restrictive conditions. We have neither sufficient courts nor sufficient staff. The explanatory memorandum to the Labour Relations Bill of 1995, which of course later became the Labour Relations Act, it proposed the establishment of specialist labour courts. The memorandum made it very clear that the basis for the decision to establish the Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court as superior courts but ring-fenced from the civil courts was to ensure that they had the primary responsibility of developing labour law. They enjoyed the confidence of labour and enjoyed the confidence of business. And the implementation of the system was for expeditious, efficient, and inexpensive labour dispute resolution. Over the years, there are, however, a number of problems that affect the efficiency and functioning of the labour courts. The first, of course, relates to status of the judges. And this is largely as a consequence of some omissions in the Act and not too serious. The second relates to the fusion of the hierarchy. Third, to do with perception of the status of the courts. And fourth, and most importantly, as I said earlier, the number of judges and the number of courts which the labour courts have to operate within. A number of problems have arisen because of the unforeseen and increased workload of the Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court. The Labour Court's model was crafted in an era when the workload of the Labour Court and Labour Appeal Court was uncertain and insufficient to warrant separate management structures for each court. Today, 23 years later, the Labour Court has 14 judges, and I said earlier, and opens in excess of 10,000 files each year. The size of the Labour Court and its caseload exceeds that of most of the high courts in this country. Proportionally, the Labour Court has far less judges than any high court in the country, and we deal with much more. And all this has led to some serious problems. The workload of the Labour Court has become extremely challenging, almost impossible to manage. On an annual basis, there is an overgrowing backlog of work, which is only limitedly managed by the appointment of nearly 30 acting judges on a pro bono basis annually, which I do during the recess period of the courts. So the mandate that the Labour Court has, like the CCMA, which is to implement, where it has to implement a system of expeditious, efficient, and inexpensive labour resolution, it is impossible for it to comply. The CCMA, on the other hand, proudly does so. No small wonder that its director was awarded the CEO of the Year last year and honored by the President. But the problem that creates with an efficient CCMA is that the workload of the labor court simply increases, because more than half the work that CCMA has got to do with reviews of CCMA awards. So all the good work done by the CCMA comes into a bottleneck because simply the matter seems to stop there for a while. As much as we try and manage matters within a year, it's impossible to do so. We've implemented a number of things, including the fact that where there is over 10 employees involved in a matter, and it's referred to the labor court, the referring party, whether it's a lawyer or a trade union, is required to write to me to inform me about this so that we can fast-track the matter. But once you fast-track, because there are so many matters with more than 10 employees, that there's individual employees and less than 10 employees have to wait sometimes 2 years before they can be heard. But there is very little one can do about this, because we can't even talk about increasing the number of judges, because you don't have courts to accommodate them. Right now, we don't only sit in the courts which were prepared for labor courts, for labor matters, we also permanently utilize the land claims court in Midrand to hear our cases. When the present minister who spoke here earlier was the Minister of Public Works, we approached him and he was very accommodating. But I suspect that building of the courts are those papers which he said are walking by themselves and not reaching anywhere. But there's another very crucial issue I need to raise here before the shop stewards. In the past year, there has been a growing phenomenon which has been quite extraordinary. Dismissed employees are deciding, and it always seemed to be they're represented by lawyers, to proceed where they claim the dismissal was unfair. To proceed on the basis of a breach of contract. So they no longer want to say the dismissal was unfair, because unfair dismissals is regulated by the Labor Relations Act. They come to the court directly instead of going through the CCMA on the basis that the dismissal has been unlawful in terms of the BCEA. I simply don't understand this. The LRA is an extraordinary regulation and says that if there is a dismissal, the employer must come and prove why the dismissal has been fair. But when you come for a breach of contract, it is the employee who has to prove that the dismissal was unlawful. There's a big difference between unlawful and fairness. Because fairness you can judge, does it look fair or unfair? Ordinary people can do that. Lawfulness is a contractual issue. It's a legal issue. And special rules apply. And what is worse is, the only reason it appears that they do this is because they find you go to CCMA, you get the matter heard fairly quickly, then you go on review, then you go to Labour Appeal Court, and this process takes about 2 years. Whereas if you go with an unlawful dismissal on a breach of contract, you go immediately to the Labour Court, you do it by what they call a notice of motion, and you could be heard in 6 months, and maybe an appeal in another 6 months, because appeals go fairly quickly. What they don't realize is that if you have the onus as an employee to prove that your dismissal was unlawful, it's an extremely difficult thing to prove. And it's done on paper, there's no evidence. And the rules, as those of us who are lawyers or have been involved with lawyers, is that the court must accept what the respondent says, which means if you're an employee, the court must accept what the employer says in its papers. So how do you prove that? And worse still, when you come with an unlawful dismissal case to the Labour Court in terms of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the normal Labour Court rules of equity does not apply. It's a question of law. When it's a question of law and you lose your case, you have to pay costs. So please, those shop stewards who may have an influence on employees, where the lawyer may tell you, let's go and we can get it quickly heard in the labor court based on unlawful or BCEA, the costs are far too high. Think about it. There obviously are certain cases which must go that route, but if it's a dismissal matter, think about it carefully before you decide to go on an unlawful dismissal rather than an unfair dismissal. One should rather wait a year to get one's job back than have one heard in 6 months and not simply lose because of the question that you need to prove, but also the cost implications. Therefore, I trust you are guided accordingly, and also, while here we are all aware of the difficulties of execution. Many shop stewards must have known that when their members or their people have got dismissed, they've gone to CCMA, they come with an award of payment, and that payment never comes. Then you have to go back, certify the award, which CCMA happily does and does fairly quickly. The CCMA, the problem is it is far too efficient, and therefore it's its own worst enemy. But anyway, so once you've got that certification, you have to go to the sheriff. And it takes an unending period to try and get the money. You wait and you wait. And I think while the minister is here and the CCMA chairman, board chairman and the director, I need to say that perhaps it's time for CCMA to start executing its own awards. Only when it comes to monetary value things. It has done extremely well so far. It does an excellent job in getting the things heard quickly, getting the awards, having it certified. What purpose then it served when an employee is sitting with an award, all well done by CCMA, and never sees the money? It's time that the CCMA is allowed to execute its own awards. I may also inform you, we're not the only country facing these issues, challenges. Last year I was in Botswana, who have exactly the same problems. And hopefully we can all get together and come up with some system that can assist and ensure that when things start at the CCMA, it can properly end with them. But then not only just on the awards, I think CCMA is the starting point for any labor dispute resolution. Eventually the end point is the labor appeal court. And one needs to look at how we can form a seamless system where when one is referring a matter for conciliation to CCMA, there is a linkage in the event right until the labor appeal court, assuming that the matter gets there. And that is crucial. And that is something which the director and I have been discussing, and hopefully with the new minister, we'll take it further. With these few words, and hopefully all of you are thirsty for tea, I trust you have a wonderful conference and most of your issues are discussed satisfactorily. Thank you very much.